Okay, so Lab 6, we're setting up our iScsi SAN. Keep in mind this is a virtual SAN, not a physical SAN, so we kind of have to keep that in mind. Because we already are kind of topping out how much memory we have, we're going to be installing our iScsi software on our VC server, our virtual center server. Just that way it makes everything a little easier. I have all of my machines powered on. Just make this a little easier. I'm going to maximize my screen. Go ahead and log into your VC server. In our previous lab, we pre-allocated two 35 gig drives. We're going to be using them to act as our LUNs for our storage. Make sure that our iScsi configuration is showing up and that our data traffic is showing up. Pay attention to the IP address there, 3.20. That's going to be important later when we set up our SAN. So what we're going to be doing is creating a new folder underneath C drive. I already created the downloads folder. You're going to be copying over the free StarWind's iScsi software. It should be in the same folder as our ISOs. Because we already have VMware tools installed, you can copy it to and from your physical to your virtual machine, from your virtual to your physical machine. VMware tools allows that to work no problem. So when you actually go into the iScsi folder, you'll notice first of all a license key. That's important because that's going to be the license key for our software. Then you'll have a getting started guide, and then you'll actually have our StarWind free software. Once we make sure all of that is there, we want to make sure that we have both of our disk drives set up. We added them, but we never initialized them or anything. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be right-clicking on Computer and going to Management, or Manage. We want to open up our Disk Manager. So underneath Storage, Disk Management. It should show that we have two 35 gig unallocated, uninitialized foreign disks. So when we first select them, make sure they're both selected. MBR is fine. You'd choose the appropriate file type depending on what we're doing. But for us, MBR is fine. You'll notice that both disks are online. We're going to be doing simple volumes on both of them. So if you select one disk, right-click on it, New Simple Volume. Allocate all the space. We are going to be assigning the first one S. Now we're going to be calling this iScsi 1. Go and do a quick format. We're going to do the same thing for the next drive, except here we'll be assigning the letter T. And this will be iScsi 2. And that's kind of weird. That's the total amount of space. We want it. Okay, so I ran out of storage space on my actual physical machine, so it didn't let me do that. So let's try this again. We're going to be assigning the full 35 gigs. We're going to be assigning it the drive letter of T. We're going to be calling it iScsi 2. Doing a quick format, and we are ready to go. That way we should have two drives, one S, one T, one called iScsi 1, one called iScsi 2. So once we are done with that, go ahead and close out of all of it, and go back to our iScsi software. We're going to go ahead and open up our iScsi software. We're doing everything default, so accept the license agreement, go through all of the software agreement, pay attention to where you're installing it. It may or may not be there already, depending if you already had it. I already had it and I uninstalled it, so I'm installing it again. So yes, I want to install in that folder anyway. Make sure to have all 3 items ticked. We want a full installation. We want to have it underneath StarWind software / StarWind. That way when we go to start, it'll be right there. We do want to create a desktop icon. Review it just to make sure everything is good. You'll notice that it popped up on our desktop. Okay, so once we have that, this may not always appear. I've had a few installations where it was done, then you had to manually open it. This kind of depends on your situation. If this doesn't appear, open up our StarWind management software, then this will appear for the very first time. Do we have a key? We have a key file there, so yes, I already have a key. So make sure to choose the 3rd option. Once we are done, we want to leave this ticked. We do want to launch it, and we're going to finish. What will happen is this may be slow. The first time that I did it, it took about 2.5 minutes to load. But I have SSDs. On a physical machine with traditional hard drives, this took 5 to 6 minutes to load, so it just kind of depends on the situation. So you'll notice that it will pop up in the background, so let's go ahead and bring that forward. The first one it loads is a loopback address, a 127.0.0.1 address. We actually want to go ahead and get rid of that. Disconnect it, and then remove it. I already did this step, that's why I have it, but I'm going to remove that one as well so we can re-add it. So we should have this just blank. When we are ready, we want to add a new StarWind server. We do not want to leave a loopback address. We want to put the IP address 192.168.3.20. That is the IP address of our iScsi NIC for this PC, because again this PC is going to be acting as our iScsi server. We're not worrying about authentication right now. In a production environment, we wouldn't be using StarWind. We would probably have a dedicated iScsi SAN, but again, for our purpose, this will work. Once you see it, make sure the IP address is there. Once that is all taken care of, we're going to be adding 2 LUNs. We're going to navigate up to target. You have to make sure it's connected first. Because it's a default installation, the password is StarWind. StarWind, all lowercase. Again, in a production environment, you probably don't want to save the password, but for my lab environment, to make things easy, I'm going to save the password. It will refresh, and we will see that we have a new target, or we actually have target and devices underneath our iScsi SAN. If this does not populate, disconnect and reconnect. I've had it hit a few times where it didn't. It took a few minutes to actually configure. Once we have this, now we can be adding our LUNs. Go up to target, add a device. we're going to be adding a hard drive. If it was a physical machine, we'd be adding a physical drive. However, since they're virtual hard drive, we're going to be adding a basic virtual drive. We're going to be doing an image file. We don't already have one, so we cannot mount an existing one. However, if we had a previous environment and we were migrating, we could mount the previously used image files. However, in this situation we don't, so we'll be creating our own. So create new virtual disk. Next. Where do we want to put it? The first one is underneath S. And we want to call it iScsi1.img. We want to put it to 33 gigs. Remember that our disks are 35 gigs, so we want it just a hair short. I'm going to uncheck compress, and that should be good. Double check that that is what we're going to name it, and that is what we want to name it. Normal caching is fine. We want to name it, we want to give it the alias of iScsi 1. You'll notice that our LUN name is now going to be added a hyphen, our target alias name. This is critical that we allow multiple concurrent iScsi connections, because we're going to have both of our ESXi hosts connecting to these LUNs for storage. So that has to be enabled. Next. And once you've verified everything, next. Should create it, no problem. Finish. We're going to do the same thing, except now we're going to do iScsi 2 underneath T. Again, iScsi.image, we're putting it 33 gigs. Asynchronous mode is fine. Normal caching is fine. Our target alias is iScsi2. Again, notice that it changed our LUN. Make sure that we allow multiple concurrent iScsi connections. Verify the settings are correct. If you are, next, and finish. You'll see if you click on devices that we have two image files, both on LUN 0, their respective names, iScsi1, iScsi2. So this is the end of Lab 6. It is imperative that from the here forward, we turn on our virtual machines in a very specific order. We have to turn on our domain controller. Once that's fully loaded, our vCenter server. Once that's fully loaded, ESXi1 and ESXi2. In our next lab, we are mapping storage to vCenter from our ESXi hosts. If vCenter is not set up or turned on first, our ESXi machines will not find our LUNs, and that just leads to additional problems. So make sure before we power on our iScsi machines that wherever our iScsi stand is, it's up and it's running. Thank you.